we're working our way through the Psalms, the book that God gave us to teach us all how to feel. And I know that we've been in the Psalms of Lament for a fair few weeks. You'll be pleased to know that this morning's Psalm isn't one of lament. But just don't get too excited, because there's parts of it that's still pretty harsh and brutal. Linda and I, a few years ago, done a course together with a guy called Bob Ekblad. And Bob Ekblad used to talk to us about toxic texts. And the Bible's full of them, those parts that we would just as sooner skip past. Yeah? Or am I the only one that does that? No? A few of you are laughing. That's a good thing. So Psalm 46 is what we're reading today. And there's part of it that, in preparing for this week, I thought I would just as sooner read over that and pay absolutely no attention to it. But here goes. I'm going to read the whole psalm. It says, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea. Though its waters roar and foam, and though the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar. Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice and the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done. The desolation he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in all the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Psalm 46. I think this was moving the whole time I'm speaking. Oh, we'll get there. If it falls, it's Phil's fault. So Psalm 46, the psalm is a powerful declaration of God's presence, protection and sovereignty that offers comfort and encouragement to those whose microphones don't work. Our opening verse sets the tone for our whole psalm, reminding us that God is a safe place, a source of strength, and is always present. I don't know about you, but I can often forget that that's true, especially when things are challenging, when microphones don't work. It's at these times that I can forget to lean on the truth of who God is, and I find myself heading into autopilot. No, it's not that I don't trust God or I don't love him. It's just, sadly, the way it is sometimes. And I suspect it's the same for most of us, if not all of us sitting in this room, that when times are hard, we forget to lean on God. Now, where's Big Fraser? Is he in the room? Is he? Happy days. If I get this next bit wrong, he's not here to pick me up on it. How many of you, if I ask the question, who is Bowlby, or Bowlby's attachment theory? Have any of you heard of this? One person. Well, the rest of you have no clue if I'm telling lies right now. So Bowlby proposed that early relationships between infants and their caregivers are crucial in forming their emotional and their social development. He argued that children, all children without exception, are biologically programmed to form attachments for their very survival. We form these attachments with a person or persons who consistently respond to our social and emotional needs. Caregivers who provide warmth, safety, and connection are those that we form the healthiest attachments with, and who we will seek out when times are tough. So when we say that God is our refuge and our ever-present help in trouble, it's important that we understand who God is and who he desires to be for each of us. Now, I know that in starting this might seem like a foundational point to be making, but I think it's one that's actually really, really important, because I think that it's one that we often wrestle with, especially when things aren't going according to plan. You see, God, in this first verse, what's actually been said is God has not failed us, and he will not fail us. He is our refuge and our strength, our ever-present help in trouble. Now, when Bowlby was developing his theory of attachment, there was a number of experiments that some of his partners did. And they carried out an expression amongst infant monkeys. So what they did was, in the cages that they had these infant monkeys, they provided a robotic monkey who, when any time it was approached, it would provide food. And they provided another monkey in the cage that didn't provide food. Instead, it provided comfort and warmth and security for the infant monkey. What one do you think the infant monkey approached? The one offering comfort. And I think in starting today, before we even get into our psalm, I think that's of fundamental importance. Because if my approach to God is simply that he gives me stuff, and I can often miss actually the comfort aspect and the security aspect and the stuff that I think Bowlby's attachment theory began to touch on. It's those latter things that I think are the richer aspects of God's nature and character to us. Now, if we're honest, we all allow the experiences that we have in life, the good and the bad ones, to impact the truth of who God is to us. And so when trouble comes, we don't look to him as that primary caregiver, that person who brings comfort, warmth, safety, and security. Instead, as we've already said, we go into autopilot and we seek to meet our own safety and security needs. Now, why am I saying all that? So the psalm opens with this really bold declaration of who God is. He is our comfort. He is our strength when trouble comes. And it's important because if you look down at your Bibles and if you read verse 2 and 3 with me, it says, "Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way, and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, and though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging." These verses present us with this apocalyptic scene. It's like a worst-case scenario type scenario. One commentator in reading earlier in the week to prepare for this notes that it's though the work of creation has been placed in reverse. It's a worst-case scenario, a scene of utter chaos. The waters that were calm in Genesis 1 now roar and submerge the mountains. And it's to this scene of chaos and confusion and of darkness and of uncertainty that the psalm opens with that line. God is our refuge and our strength and ever-present help when we face troubles. It's as though the psalmist is reminding the community and us of God's ever-present state. Now, I've got a love-hate relationship with the news. Yeah? I sometimes go through seasons where I watch the news every day and I enjoy it. And I'm like, oh, this is nice. It's nice to know what's going on in the world. And there are other times when I watch the news and I find myself screaming at the TV. And recent weeks, I've been looking at the TV and screaming in frustration a lot. Where we've got Trump and the Republicans siding with Putin, a known murderer and dictator, and the scenes in the Oval Office of him and Vance ganging up on the Ukrainian Prime Minister, I just found myself watching it and thinking, what's actually taking place here? What's going on? The chaos that has caused to NATO and to our European leaders all frantically running to meet with one another and thinking, actually, how are we going to bolster our defences? Tariffs and the instability that they're likely to cause, not just to our economy, but to the global economy, where we've seen China and Canada already respond with their own reciprocal tariffs. Not even to mention Greenland, where we've the leader of the free world saying, I'm going to take it by any means. And that's a direct quote. It says, one way or another, we are going to get it. And I'm watching the news thinking, I literally can't believe that in my lifetime, this sort of stuff is happening. And then in preparing for the week, I was mindful of what David McAdam said at my induction service here, which was actually, David, bring a word in season. And then when I reread Psalm 46, I looked at it and thought, actually, if ever there was a psalm that was in season, it's Psalm 46. Verse 2 and 3, I'm going to read it again. I know. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. Now, this scene is often thought to describe some ancient war with Israel and the Assyrians. But in preparing for this week, when I read Psalm 46 again, I couldn't help but notice it speaks prophetically to our time right now, where some of the things that we've learned to rely on for our peace and our security, these structures, these mountains, if you like, are suddenly being made unstable. Now, I'm giving away all my bias up here and my political leanings. But I want to say this, whether you agree with Mr. Trump or not, whether you agree with those who are like him or not, I'm sure that at least all of us can agree that there's a state of real confusion and chaos that's currently spreading its way across the world. And it's in this place of lies, of disinformation, of chaos and confusion. It's in this place that the next verses in our psalm speak. Verse 4 through 6 says, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of our God. It's in that place of chaos and disinformation and confusion and loss that this river flows. Verse 4 starts there. There is the river. It's in that place of brokenness. It's in that place of chaos. Some translations use the word place. Others use the word places. It's plural. Because each of us as believers now are the dwelling place of God, the same river that flows into and through us. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God. There's a wee hint here of Ezekiel 47, the vision in Ezekiel 47 of this life-restoring river that symbolises God's restoration, that brings healing, abundance and renewal. And I hope you'll forgive me of jumping into John 7 on the back of that, where we hear Jesus' own words. It says, if anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scriptures have said, streams of living water will flow from within him. You see, it's amidst the chaos and the confusion of life, it's amidst the chaos and confusion of our current political systems. It's there that God flows. We sang it this morning that God is in the darkness. For a lot of my Christian existence, I thought that wasn't true, which meant that when I was in dark times, God wasn't ever present. He's not far off. He's present in our troubles, existing with us in the place of chaos and confusion. It's amongst all of these uncertainties of the current mess that God is our refuge and strength, our ever-present help when we're in trouble. Now, I was trying to think back to times in my life when I've faced chaos and confusion and trouble, and unusually my life is marked with most of that, which is why I'm so at home in the book of Psalms. But I kind of thought back to when Alfie was born. So, Amanda was heavily pregnant, about to give birth any day, and my dad took really no well. And my sister and I, we got a phone call to say that we had to rush our way down to the hospital. Now, I'm not medical in any way, shape or form, and within the meeting, the doctors using language that had me confused. All I knew was that my sister was deeply, deeply distressed. I'm smart enough to have read between the lines and thinking, this can't be good. Long and short of it is that my dad had had an operation. The operation we thought was successful. It then led to an internal bleed, and they couldn't fix it. So essentially what they were telling us as a family was that all we're going to do here is provide palliative care. So for the next couple of days, my sister, myself and my mum were doing a wee rotation where we would stay overnight out at the hospital. My dad and I had a strange relationship. I loved him, I respected him in some ways, not in others. And I got a phone call to say, look, we think probably your dad's hours away, you should make your way down to the hospital. So I left Paisley, left Amanda in the house and drove all the way to Greenock. And by the time I got there, my dad had died. And I was watching my mum and my sister in a state of real distress, as you can imagine. And I found myself standing in the hospital ward, a bit confused as to how I should feel. So I'm thinking there, on the one hand, my dad's gone, he's no longer here, and I know I should feel a particular way about this. But on the other hand, I'm anticipating the birth of my firstborn son. Literally, Amanda's literally ready to give birth any minute. And I get a phone call from my mother-in-law to say that Amanda's gone into labour. And then I'm standing in Inverclyde Royal Hospital thinking, right, I need to boost. I need to leave here, and I need to drive home, and I need to go and try and comfort my wife during this time. And I don't know if any of you know Greenock or Port Glasgow, but when you come past the roundabout at Newark Castle, I stopped in at Newark Castle. There's a car park there that looks out over the Clyde. And I sat and I just talked to God for a wee bit. And I was like, God, I don't know how to feel right now. I don't know whether I should be happy or sad. I don't know if I should be sitting here grieving the loss of my dad, or I should be rejoicing in the birth of my first son. What I do remember is feeling at peace. I remember sitting there in that moment and knowing peace like I had rarely known at any other point in my life before, which then enabled me to drive home. Now, it turns out that Alfie didn't come along to 2:30 in the morning, and even that came with its complications. But all of us go through these times in life when it's hard and when it's confusing and when we don't actually know where to turn. And if, again, you'll pay attention to the psalm for a wee minute, and if you look to verse 7, it speaks to exactly this state. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Now, I couldn't have put words to it that day sitting in the car park at Newark Castle, but that was my experience, that God was with me. Emmanuel, God with us. He's that primary caregiver who provides warmth, safety, and connection in our times of trouble. Now, verse 8 and 9 are those verses that I mentioned or hinted at even before I started speaking today, the ones that you would much rather just not read. I says to Stuart midweek, if you get any decent commentaries that can help me wrestle with God just killing everything. And he's like, nah. So, verse 8, come and see what the Lord has done, the desolation he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shield with fire. Verse 8 and 9 assert God's sovereignty over the chaos of the nations, making wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and he shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. And in place of them, he transforms them into a new world, a world without weapon or war, where peace will extend to all humanity. You see, this is the central message of Psalm 46, that God will bring chaos and war to an end. It's a psalm of radical trust in the face of overwhelming threat. The psalm was read aloud in September 11's terror attacks in America. A human-created terror that inspired fear, and it's this fear that has allowed a constant cycle of violence to continue in our world right up into the present day. And it's to this state of fear, of confusion, and of loss that we should read verse 10 of Psalm 46. So I'm going to read verse 10. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in all the earth. Because we're working our way through the Psalms, and the Psalms are quite poetic and they use really emotive language at points, I thought I would try and have a stab at reimagining verse 10 and what I think it is that God is actually saying to us and what I think it is that he might be asking of us. And I think what he's saying is, stop fighting and know that I am God. How many of you have heard of a guy called Dietrich Bonhoeffer? Yeah? Happy days. If I get this wrong, don't anybody say anything. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a German theologian. He was killed essentially because of his opposition to the Nazi Party. He was influenced by a guy called Martin Buber, who was a Jewish philosopher and theologian. And Buber developed this well-known concept of I, thou, and I, it. For Buber, the I-thou relationships that exist within humanity are those where we treat others with dignity, love, and respect, where we recognize them as unique beings made in the very image of God. And the I, it is slightly more opposed to it than that. It's a more detached way of interacting with others. It's where we treat people simply as objects, seen as entities, and where the relationships are often ones where manipulation is central, where they're impersonal and even objective. And I couldn't help but think of this and look at how we're interacting right now on the global stage, and where relationships are being made to be things that are transactional, where I'll only be kind to you if somehow I can get something from you. Bonhoeffer extended this, and he developed a Christian theology, a Christian ethic around it. So for him, he saw the I, thou, so I and Amanda being the thou, yeah? He saw these relationships and the dignity and the self-respect and the sacrifice that should exist in these relationships. He said that was only possible if we get the most profound I-thou relationship right, which is between us and God. Yeah? So he says we're only able to do this if we first do this. For Bonhoeffer, true relationship requires justice, sacrifice, and responsibility towards others. True human relationships reflect our connection with God, They compel us to act justly, sacrificially, and responsibly towards others. And again, in Reimagine in verse 10, stop fighting, be still, and know that I am God. Now, I want to take it slightly further than this. And this might just be me speaking to me today. And if that's the case, I'm not even sorry. But I want to say, stop fighting with yourself. Be still and know that I am God. Be still. Stop fighting with yourself, with others, with the world at large. Know that I am God. Know that I am the one who provides warmth, safety, and connection to us all. Amen. So I'm going to invite Linda up. She's going to help lead us in communion.